Numbers. We live by numbers. We track and count and measure everything, and sometimes we think the only numbers that really matter are the big ones. But it's the single digits that make the difference. The Bible says that heaven rejoices with the number 1. Yeah, heaven rejoices each time even one person comes to know Jesus. We pastors dream about big numbers, and we should. But a daily focus on one meaningful interaction for Christ, that's the true difference maker. One friend, one family member, one coworker, one person at a time. We want to see God move in our nation like we have never seen before, but it all starts with one. I've got my one, and now I'm challenging you and your church to join us and to find yours. Because ultimately, the only number that really matters is one. Who's your one?
So, does anybody remember what the sermon was all about last week?
We had a sermon.
It's always about Jesus. Was it on faith?
Well, all of it's on faith, yeah. What was it?
I thought it was on having faith in Him. If you've got problems, or if you think you've got stuff that you can't
Kinda.
tackle on your own, put your faith in Him.
Yeah, I titled it something else. Breakthrough. Huh? It was on Breakthrough. The whole thing, the series was on Breakthrough, but the title of the message was this: Bringing Death to Life. Remember? And what is the one thing that is dead that you can actually bring back to life? Huh? The lost. Exactly. Lost people are dead. And you can bring them back to life by showing them Jesus and allowing them to put their faith in Jesus. And so that's where we come to this morning as we start the series. Oh, Children's Church, yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. All right, while they're doing that, we're going to take our scriptures this morning out of Matthew chapter 4, so if you'll just open up your Bibles and go there, we'll get to them eventually here in a minute. We'll do some prelims before we talk about it. So, first, let me ask you this question. What comes to your mind when I say the word Christian? Believer? That's Jesus calling. Somebody's asking for a lifeline. He'll get the answer. Huh? That was his one. What we would think really is kind of, as the church here, we kind of think of ourselves as a bunch of Christians, right? Kind of all that way. But if I was to ask you, and let's play some little word games. You don't have to say them out loud, okay? So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and you just kind of think in your mind the first word that would come to your mind. Let's go. Here we go. What do you think the first thing pops in your mind when I say Bernie Sanders supporter? What's the first image that comes into your mind when I say Trump supporter? How about when I say vegan? What's the first thing that pops into your mind or the image? How about if I say an Ohio State fan or a Cincinnati Reds fan or, God forbid, a Cincinnati Bengals fan? Or if I was to ask you, what pops into your mind if I was to say a NASCAR fan? Or if I was to say Star Wars, would it be the old Star Wars or the new Star Wars? Define which one you want to talk about, Pastor. I thought it was just all the same. But evidently, it's not all of the same. You see, what happens is that a lot of times when we get a term and we hear this term and there's certain images that we get that just kind of pop into our mind all of the time. And one of those is the word Christian. Because if I was to do like a out on the street interview with people, and if I was to take a microphone out to about 10 people on the street, and what I would ask them, what is your definition of a Christian? Or if I was to say the word Christian, what would be the first thing that you would think of? I would probably get 10 different answers. As a matter of fact, I got one this week. It was during VBS, and every once in a while we have issues with people thinking that our property is a dog park. And so they decide to just bring their dogs over here and walk them. And so I was trying to be really nice and polite, and a young man was out there walking his dog, and I walked up to him and I said, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" I said, are you with the people next door? Yeah. Well, then can I say this to you? I don't know if they've told you or not, but we've asked them to not let you guys walk your dogs on our property. And the guy looks at me and he says, "So you're a church?" Yeah, it's a big building with a steeple. Yeah, we're a church. And you're telling me I can't walk on your property? No, I'm saying you can walk all you want. I just say don't bring your dog with you. Well, I've got a bag here to pick it up. And I said, so? Don't you understand? We've got kids that are going to come out here and play pretty soon. And dogs' doo-doo is not really sanitary or healthy, you know? You're a church? Yeah, I'm a church. Well, God bless you. I said, well, God bless you too, sir. So you're a church? Yeah, we're a church. And you're not going to let me walk my dog on this property? No, I'm asking you not to walk your dog on this property. Well, God bless you. You're really a church, huh? Yeah, and I'm the pastor. God bless you. So I thought, boy, he's got a real good image of what a Christian is, doesn't he? I'm a dog hater. That's what a Christian is. But sometimes we've got some things mixed up. Because if you were to go back into the very beginning of time, when Jesus was just beginning his ministry and was walking with everyone, he began to have some followers. And can I say something to y'all? His first followers were not called Christians. They were called disciples, not Christians. And so what happened was that actually, in the very beginning, if you were to tell somebody that you were a Christian, the word Christian was a derogatory name. Okay? And they used this as people outside of the Jewish community. And so if you were a Christian, you were looked down upon. So you were not called a Christian. They didn't use the term Christian at all. Actually, if you go into the Bible and later on and look at Acts chapter 11 and verse number 26, you will see it says, and they were first called Christians at Antioch. The word Christian was never used until after Jesus had already died. After people had begun to start believing and getting saved and baptized. It wasn't until later on that they began to use the word Christians, because they refer to themselves as disciples. Let me give you another interesting fact. In the Bible, you will only find the word Christian mentioned 3 times. But yet you will hear the word disciple mentioned 281 times. Something different here that we have kind of forgotten. And sometimes I know a lot of you are probably wondering, okay, he's gone off his rocker, here he goes again. Upsetting us totally and completely. I thought that when somebody came up and asked me the question, I was to tell them that I'm a Christian. And now he's telling me that I'm not to use that term anymore, that I'm supposed to say I'm a disciple of Jesus. Listen, I want you to know something, and that is this. I'm not trying to confuse you, but I need you to understand something. Today what happens is we have lost our way. Because what's happened is we use the word Christian, and somebody says, okay, well, what does Christian mean? Well, that means I'm like Christ. So I'm supposed to be like Christ. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do that. And so what ends up happening is that so many times we forget that there was something else that happened before they were called Christians. And we need to bring it back to understand exactly what it is that God has commanded us to do. I shared in Sunday school this morning. Here's the deal. I served in the military. For those of you that also served in the military, when you were given a command, was it optional? I don't care whether you liked it or not. They were in command. They gave the command. You followed the command. If you didn't, you got reprimanded, you got discharged, or whatever, some type of penalty. What's happened is this. God has given us command, that we have totally ignored. Because we say we are Christians. And so therefore we don't really have to do this. Let's start. Matthew chapter 4, verse number 18 through verse number 21. We're talking about who's your one. Here's what he says. As he was walking along the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Follow me, he told them, and I will make you fish for people. Immediately they left their nets and they followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with Zebedee, their father, preparing their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Now, whenever I don't know what you felt like when you first read this story. Because when I first read the story and it's the writer, same kind of thing. Back in the days when I went to Sunday school, they did flannel graphs. You all know what those are? Remember? You had a flannel graph. And on the flannel graph, you had a picture of Jesus. Okay? And this would stick on there. And so what they would do is they would have this picture of Jesus. And whenever they always pictured Jesus, they always pictured him in a white robe with a Miss America sash. You know? And it kind of like said, here, I'm Jesus. And so all of a sudden you would see him, and in this story they would show Jesus with this Miss America sash walking up to the boat. And these guys were in the boat, and all Jesus would say is, follow me. And all of a sudden you see these two guys hop out of the boat, you know. It's just like they're mesmerized. Jesus has got these real wide eyes that are saying, follow me, follow me, follow me. And it's like they just get up out of the boat like, you know, I don't want to say zombies because that's not good. But they walk like they're hypnotized and they're following Jesus out of the boat. And then he goes over to James and John and they're in the boat with their dad Zebedee. And all of a sudden Jesus says, follow me. And it's like they just get up out of the boat and they just go following Jesus. And as little kids, we didn't have all of the video technology that we have today. And so we just kind of had to play make-believe, you know? And you could just use your imagination with all of the things that were going on. And so what would happen is they would just say, you know, this, just follow me, okay? Now, one of the things that we forget is this. In the time of Jesus, let me give you some background. Every Hebrew boy would go to what was called a Torah school. You know what the Torah is, right? The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You started there at the age of 5 in the Torah school. And what happened was they would take these 5-year-old little boys, and this was the ceremony. They would take them, and then what they would do is they would take a drop of honey and put it on the tongue of the little boy, because it would symbolize that the Word of God is like sweet honey to my body. And what they would do is they would start teaching these little boys scriptures. And that's what they would do. For the next 5 years until the age of 10, they would teach them nothing but Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. For 5 years, they would take the scriptures over and over and over and over and over again. That was their teaching. After 5 years, what they would do is they would take, at the age of 10, and the boys that couldn't memorize too well, they would start weeding them out. And they went back to the fathers. And so what would happen is, at the age of 10, if you didn't have a good memory and you weren't doing that well with memorizing the first 5 books of the Torah, then what you did was you then became an apprentice to your father. Your father would teach you a trade. And then they would take those ones that would stay on until the age of 17, and they would keep them in the school, and they would learn the rest of the Bible all the way through Malachi. And so they were doing these things, okay? And so what happened was, at the age of 17, they then made another cut. And only the best ones got to go on to become a rabbi. Okay? And they would apply to become that a rabbi's, what was called a Talmud. Okay? Rabbi means teacher. Talmud means disciple. So what that 17-year-old would do was, there would be somebody that had gone through this whole process and has now become a rabbi. Hang on to this because it's important. And then what would happen is, once you made that cut to become a rabbi, you attached yourself, or they attached you to another rabbi, and you were discipled by that rabbi. Understand? Basically becoming an apprentice to a rabbi. Not an apprentice to your father to learn a secular job. But you would go on to do this. Because everyone, the most prestigious job that you could have during that period of time was not a carpenter, not a metal worker, not a builder. The most prestigious job that you could have was to be a rabbi in the Jewish community. They were looked up to, the best. You are the expert in the religion, okay? And so what would happen is, the rabbis would choose only the smartest and most talented boys to become their Talmud, okay? And so they had these groups that they would have as disciples. They would learn their mannerisms, okay? They would also learn how that they answered certain questions, getting the knowledge that they needed to go. They would learn how to respond in certain situations. And the greatest compliment that you could have during that period of time was this, that the dust of your rabbi is all over you. You're standing close to him because they're saying that's how close you're following him, is that when he's walking down the road and his feet are starting to kick up the dust, that you're walking so close to your rabbi that you as a Talmud are following so close that his dust is coming upon you. You're not walking far off, you're walking close. You got to understand this and get this. This is why I'm saying there is so much buried in the Bible, ladies and gentlemen, that we don't learn. And it's very significant in what it is that Jesus is telling us. Now, there was another thing, that there was a very special rabbi, the highest that you could ever have. And this rabbi got to be called, the people called a smisha, S-M-I-C-H-A. And smisha just translates as authority, okay? Remember that. Smisha means authority. And you'll find out where I'm going and tying all of this together. Okay? So what happens was, there was only a few of these that actually were recognized as smisha. And you'll recognize a couple of names if you read in the Bible or read history. You'll recognize one of them as Hela, which is not in the Bible, but you'll find him with Josephus. But you'll find one that is in the Bible, and his name was Gamaliel, G-A-M-A-I-L-E-L. And do you remember who he was? Huh?
He was a Pharisee, the disciple of Paul.
Yes. He was the one that when Saul got converted on the road to Damascus, Jesus says, I want you to go to Gamaliel and stay there with him, and he will teach you what you need to know. You are to become his disciple. Because why? Gamaliel had become Jesus' disciple. And now he is going to make Saul, now called Paul, into a Talmud, a disciple. Okay? Now these guys, you have to understand something. They were all masters of the Torah. Okay? And sometimes they would do some things. Now, in order to be called a rabbi with smisha, or authority, there was something that had to happen. You had to have evidence that you had done miracles. Credible evidence. Not saying that you had done a miracle. It had to be verified evidence that you had done miracles. Okay? And so what ends up happening is, when you go back to Jesus, here's where it comes into. Here comes Jesus, who knew the Torah Remember at the age of 12, when they lost him and they found him in the temple? And when they found him, he was sitting there teaching at the age of 12, the Torah. And everybody was sitting on the edge of their seat saying, no one has ever spoken with such smisha. No one has ever spoken with such authority or smisha. He's already a rabbi, ladies and gentlemen, with authority. So when you see now in the Bible where it says that he speaks with such authority, now you understand what they're talking about. He has already obtained his smisha. He already knows the ins and outs of the Bible, speaking to them and talking to them. And so in Luke chapter 20, they even asked Jesus a question. Where do you get your authority? Where do you get the authority to do this or do that? Asking him the question, where do you get your smisha? Where do you get this smisha? Who conferred it upon you? We need to know. He does miracles. How dare you? Who conferred this upon you? And you got to understand, in Matthew chapter 4, in verse number 23, let me show you. It says, now Jesus began to go all over Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. What did he do? Oh yeah. Now, he has become the rabbi, ladies and gentlemen, with authority, who now has the authority to take on an apprentice, and that apprentice now becomes his Talmudan, which means disciple. And when Jesus is trying to tell us who's your one, we need to understand these things. He's telling everybody, he's saying, listen, when Jesus was coming and John saw him, John turned around to Jesus and he told everybody, he says, look, he is so much greater than I am. I'm just the one to preparing the way for him, because he is the rabbi with smisha. So when he has the smisha, ladies and gentlemen, you become his disciple. You become his Talmudan. That's what you become. And so what Jesus is saying, when people wanted to know, well, where do you get your authority? Remember when Jesus got baptized? And he came up out of the water? And all of a sudden, there was a dove that came out of heaven and landed upon him. And a voice that spoke out of heaven that said, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. Where did he get his authority? Ladies and gentlemen, when they asked him, where do you get your authority to do the things that you do? He says, I get my authority from God. That's who I get my authority from. So you want to know who became the rabbi to be able to have the authority with smisha? He got the authority from God. So what? So that he could teach us, ladies and gentlemen, to be his disciples. So many times we want to say, well, I'm a Christian. No, ladies and gentlemen, we are his disciples. That's who we are. We're his disciples. A disciple does what? A disciple does what? A disciple sits at the feet of the teacher, learning what the teacher wants to teach them, learning the things that they are supposed to do, getting their authority from that teacher to be able to do the same things that the teacher was teaching them to do. That's, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are to do. So let's talk about number one, the very first thing in the PowerPoint, Linda. We'll give you the points. It should be buried, it's buried in there. Okay. Let me give you this one. It's number one, and here's what you need to understand. That God doesn't, the next one. And the title of the message is On Earth as It Is in Heaven. What's the prayer? On earth as it is in heaven. So here it is. Jesus doesn't choose the best. He chooses the willing. You got to understand something. Jesus, in his time, there was all kinds of people. You know, there were the Egyptians. They had libraries. They had very scholarly people. They had all of these people that could do all kinds of everything. But let me say something to y'all. Jesus didn't choose the scholarly. Look at what he chose. He chose Peter and Andrew, fishermen. James and John, fishermen. Matthew, an IRS tax collector. I don't know about y'all, but if I was wanting to choose somebody to come follow me, I don't think I want a tax collector. I want them on my side, you know, then they may overlook some things. But Jesus, he didn't choose the best. He chose the willing. And so many times we forget, because what ends up happening is this. We think that what God is doing is God wants to look at the best and do all of the best. And I fail. I'm not the best. Let me say something to y'all. There are greater preachers in the world than me and Michael. Okay? I kind of lump us together. But what happens is this. He's not asking but one thing. Are you willing to follow me? Are you willing? You see, when Paul said he was the least in the kingdom, or John the Baptist said he was the least in the kingdom, it doesn't mean that you know the least about the Bible. It doesn't mean that you're the least eloquent or that you have the least amount of spiritual gifts. It doesn't mean that you're the least capable. What it means is this. I understand I'm not the best. I'm not the best. But God, I want to be the most willing. I don't want to ever say no to him. You see, here's what happens. God calls us to do stuff. And we say, God, I can't do this because you don't understand. I don't have the talents. I don't have the gifts. That's not my forte. You know, I'll just throw this out because there's a lot of you that are like this, and I understand it. If I was to ask, starting next week, we're going to start rotating visiting preachers. And you're all going to get your shot at doing the sermon. There would be some of them that were saying, whoa, I have been wanting to get up there and tell you what I think. Can I go first? You know, can I do it first? Because I really got some things that I would like you to sit and listen to me sometime, Pastor, instead of me having to sit down and listen to you. But the majority of you would probably say, and Diana would come up with the list, and you would know that you're 3 weeks, it's your turn. And I guarantee you that I could come visit you on that day at your house you're sick. 90% of you would probably say, you don't understand. That is not what I'm capable of doing. May I say this to you? God doesn't ask if you're capable. He just asks, are you willing? Are you willing? You see, because most of the time, ladies and gentlemen, God asks us to do stuff and we tell him no because we're not qualified. And God doesn't say, I want someone that's qualified. I want someone that's willing. You don't understand, I'm not as good as Chuck, and I know you guys can't be as good as me. You know? I've been at this for a long time, okay? And I'm still not good at it. But I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. At the age of 16, I said, I'm willing to do this. My first one, God bless those people that sat through it. They learned some things that were there and not there. So let me finish up with my point before I turn over to Michael. J.D. Greer wrote this story, and I just want to share with you, okay? Because a lot of times we become this person, okay? He said, he says that he chose you because he knew that you could be a willing vessel, that you could walk through, and the Holy Spirit in your mouth of one believer is more powerful than the army of the most eloquent orators in the world. And he says, I saw a really good example of this when I was in college. He said, we started a real small little Bible study that was just designed to introduce some of our friends that we were meeting to Jesus. And it kind of puttered along for a few months, and there was 12 of us or something. Well, we decided that we were going to have one night where we invited all of our friends that we could get to come to one kind of place where we would kind of explain the gospel and tell them about Jesus. So we planned for this thing. We planned for about a month. We passed out flyers, and the day before we were going to do the thing, it was going to be on a Tuesday night. He said, our little core team was meeting at lunch in the dining room. And there was one member of our team. Her name was Amy, he said, if I remember correctly. She was one of the shyest girls that I've ever met. The kind that it just seems like it's painful when she's trying to talk with people. Some of you all understand. He said, but I think she prayed a lot, which I don't know, but whatever. But she was pretty awesome, but she just didn't talk a lot. So she was over here to my left. I'm talking to somebody over to my right, and all of a sudden I hear this commotion beside me. And I look up, and she's standing on top of the dining room table, just looking out over the entire dining hall. Then she stamps her foot, and I look, and I think she just kind of lost her mind. I'm looking to see if somebody had poured Jack Daniels in her apple juice or whatever. Like, what's happening to this girl? So she stands, she gets the entire place quiet in a very small, kind of as loud as she could project her mousy voice. She says, hey, I know most of you don't know me, and you probably think I'm crazy, But I consider all of you my friends. And tomorrow night, some friends of mine and I, we're going to explain what the greatest thing is in our life. How Jesus Christ has changed our lives. And we believe he can change yours. And I really think all of you should come. And so she sat back down. And I looked at her and I said, what just happened to Amy? I'm not really sure. And she said, I don't know. I just really felt the Holy Spirit told me to do that. Now listen, I'm not saying when you listen to the Holy Spirit you hear voices all the time or you're going to start doing wacky things continually. But listen what he says. But I will tell you the next night, we had over 700 people show up. And in large part because of the people like her that were listening to the Holy Spirit and doing what he told them to do. 700. Taken from a girl that couldn't speak. Scared half to death to speak in public. But what did God do? He used her to reach 700 people.
So God just doesn't choose the best, he chooses the willing. And I want to hit upon that first part for my second point here. Number 2, God chose us, not we him. Get that straight. God chose you. And he chose you not for your abilities, but he chose you for who you are. You see, that's the greatest source of our confidence, is the fact that God has chose us. How good does it feel to be chosen? Honestly. Think back in school, schoolyard pick'em. What didn't you want to be? Last person picked. I didn't care if I was in the middle, I didn't want to be at the end. But to be picked first felt amazing. But not only that, we're chosen by the best. The one with the greatest authority. Remember that, Shmisha? The person who has the greatest authority chose you to be his disciple. The person that we can respect, he chose me. Now imagine this. Imagine you're at the grocery store doing your job or wherever you work, and in walks the head coach of the Cincinnati Reds and says and looks right at you, I want you to pitch this game for me tonight.
Couldn't do any worse.
Exactly. But in all honesty, it doesn't matter. Imagine some big NFL player or whatever coming in and picking you to play, and you're thinking, I can't do this. And God's saying, don't worry about it. I chose you. I'm ready for you to do this. Like we said, some of us would jump at those chances, others of us would shriek in fear. But the great source of our confidence isn't the fact that we were looking for the opportunity, is that God came looking for us. He chose us when we weren't looking for him. He came seeking us when we weren't even aware that we should be looking for him. He wants you to be his disciple. He wants you. There are so many people in this world today that are feeling alone and depressed and left out. And all they want is to be wanted by somebody. Have you ever felt that way in your life? You ever got to the place and point where it doesn't feel like anybody wants you or needs you? And here, the creator of the universe, the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, is looking down upon you and saying, I want you to be my disciple. To bring you alongside of me, to teach you, to train you, to love you. That is why it is important that we understand that our confidence comes first in the fact that he chose us. We've been walking through Ephesians in Sunday school. And Ephesians is packed with some really difficult stuff. Some people look at it and they kind of get fear because it talks about predestination and preordination and those types of things. And you're thinking, oh, I'm not a Calvinist, I'm not this. Look at this here. In Ephesians, in the midst of what it's trying to tell us, is that we can feel overwhelmed by opposition. You can be confident that God chose you. God's going to see it through, and it doesn't matter what size of the obstacles are in front of you. It matters the size of the God behind you. Think about this. You ever heard the saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. That is our faith. How many times does it feel like you're fighting for your life? That you're in a constant battle. And you're always feeling oppressed. You're feeling that you can't get anywhere. And you're thinking, well, I can't get through life. And then we go back to the fact that God chose us. It gives you a sense of oomph in your life, to stand tall, to stand proud. God didn't choose anybody. He chose everybody, and He chose you specifically. And He says this, He says, I am going to make you bear fruit. Fruit where you win other people to Jesus. Fruit that will last in eternity. He says this, I chose you, and I have a plan for you, and a purpose for you. And I'm going to continue that purpose in you, and I'm not going to drop the ball. So when we lack confidence in ourselves, we put confidence in the one who gave you the purpose to begin with. By a show of hands, who has felt inadequate in their life at anything? You ever taken a new job and maybe, I don't want to say fibbed on their resume, but you did a really good interview. You get in there and you're like, all right, here you go. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. But what makes it easy is if you have somebody to train you and to help you along the way. If you have someone that comes in and says, hey, it's okay, I'm going to help you, I'm going to show you. You feel a lot better about things. But if you just get tossed into the wind, it's scary. I mean, could you imagine that in the medical profession field? You go to apply to be a doctor, they don't check up on your credentials, first day in, heart surgery. All right, doctor, what do you want to do? What would you want to do? And you'd be like, have you done this before? I've watched a YouTube video. Here's God. We're those people who didn't qualify. We don't have the application. And He says, it's okay. I'm going to walk you through this. I chose you to do this job because I know you can do it. I created you. You see, God never fails. And the reason that we fail is not because of Him, it's because we lose confidence in Jesus. We've lost confidence in the promise that He's going to fulfill it. An example of this is Peter walking out on the water with Jesus. He says, if it's you, Jesus, call me out on the water. And what happens? Peter steps out, he walks right on that water. He's feeling strong and confident. But then all of a sudden he begins to sink, not because he lost faith in Jesus, but because he lost faith in the fact that Jesus was working through him. You see, we all have a plan in our life. Most of us do, right? How many of you have had a plan and stuck to it your entire life? Nobody, right? There was a really great philosopher, a really great thinker. He said this, we have a plan until we get punched in the face. Mike Tyson. We all have a great plan until life punches us right in the teeth. And then sometimes our world falls apart because things come in. I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost my husband, my father died, I slipped down into addiction, I slipped into this, I slipped into that. It doesn't matter what it is. Life kicks you in the teeth, and then we're all of a sudden wanting and searching. And here's God saying, have confidence in me. I have a plan for your life. Stick to it. Stay with me. Be my disciple. Anybody in here feel like you're facing insurmountable odds right now? You feel like there are things in your life that you're just not going to be able to conquer. Let me tell you something. You can't. You can't do it. But I know someone who can work through you to do it. Jesus says this, when I am faithless, He's going to be faithful. When I am unable, He is able. Isaiah 46:11 says what Jesus says that I will bring about. He will bring it about to fruition because He is the one who instilled the work in us. And God is faithful to the end. He keeps His promises. Even when everyone around you, even myself, I have promised things and I have not followed through. God doesn't do that. He follows through every single time. So for those of you in here who are struggling with their lives, and I know you are in here, I know that there are people in this room right now who are leading a life and they are unhappy, they are dissatisfied, they are heartbroken over the things they have done. But let me tell you this, you are forgiven. Amen. You are forgiven by what Christ has done for you, and He wants to continue to work in you to bring you out of that pit of hell that you're in. Amen. He is going to go down to the depths of hell to drag you out because He chose you and He wants you right now. God has preordained and predestined good for us. He is the travel secretary that goes ahead and makes sure that things are ready for us. He knows the works that we need to do. He knows the people we need to connect to. He knows who needs to be around us. What we have to do is realize that He's chosen us, and we have to make ourselves willing. The third thing, our primary call is to follow. Let me rephrase that. Not just to follow, it's to be with Him. In order to follow somebody, you have to be with them, right? I'll give you an example. I was in D.C., what was that, last Wednesday?
Yeah.
I was following my brother-in-law. He is difficult to follow.
Yes.
We're in D.C. traffic. If you know that, it's very busy. He's in the far left lane. I'm like 6 cars behind because it's just hard to keep up. All of a sudden, he goes from the far left lane to an exit. Now, we're in an underground tunnel. I can't see. I pass him as he's going down the exit. I lost my mind. I have no idea where we're going. If I was bumper to bumper with him, I would have been able to maybe follow him. Either that or I would have caused like a 10-pile car wreck. But you have to be with somebody to follow them. You have to be in the midst of their footsteps. You see, one of the greatest things is that we get to call God Father. And you see, if you ever see a little children, they try to put their daddy's boots on because they want to follow in His footsteps. We have to do the same thing. We have to be right next to Jesus. To follow Him means to be with Him. You got to spend time with Him. It means you got to soak it in. And here at Calvary Baptist, we are trying to implement more and more ways to get integrated into His Word and into His ways. There's a couple ways you can do that. First, you got to show up. All right? We have Facebook, that's fine. That's not showing up. Come and be a part. Hear the Word. Sunday morning, Sunday school, Wednesday night. We have opportunities for you to come and to hear preaching and to do those things. We have small groups and small Bible studies. We're going to be instituting the pipeline training to where you can do online training at home and then meet with a person individually to come and to know Christ better. These are things that you have to do. There's no excuse. There is no excuse. If you can say, I don't have the time, it means you're not making the time. You have to be willing. You cannot know Jesus any more than you know His Word. Number 4, to follow Him, you have to leave immediately. You have to leave immediately. What that means is that we have to depend on Him for everything. We have to depend on the Father to take care of us physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally. That's what faith is. It's dependence upon Him. You see in Matthew 4 here, when it says, especially to John and Zebedee, He says they were mending their nets, and He called them. Immediately they left their boat and their father. They left their job. Let me ask you this. How many of you dislike your job? You guys are all liars. How many of you guys, if you, in all honesty, you'd want to leave your job, but you said, let me get you this, leaving your job with not knowing where you're going, even if you dislike your job, would you leave it? Most of the time, probably not. Because we have to feed our families. We're not going to say, yeah, that sounds great, but I still got a family to feed. That means you have to leave your dependence upon yourself and trust in God. Now, God's not calling everybody to leave their jobs, okay? If I get a call tomorrow morning and be like, I left my job, what now? Take it back. But there are times in our life that it may require leaving our job to go plant a church, to go be a missionary, to go wherever God's telling you to go. The other thing it's calling us to is to leave our most significant relationships. Now hear me on this one before you jump to conclusions. It says they left their boat and they left their father. That signifies generally fathers are their most significant relationships in this time. And so they're leaving that behind because Jesus had called them to it. Now not everybody in this room is going to leave their significant others or leave things behind. God doesn't want us to split up. God doesn't want to break marriages up. He doesn't want to do anything like that. But what he is telling us is our utter and total dependence must be upon him. We must love Jesus above all else. There's an example and a story in here where a woman in the Middle East did have to leave her family because she lived in an Islamic community and she trusted in Jesus. And she told her family that, and the family said, renounce Jesus or we'll renounce you. And she said, I'm not going to do that. And she overhears them and they say, we're going to kill her tonight. She escapes, and now she's a refugee in North Carolina. You see, some of us won't be faced with that decision, but what we will be faced with is making tough decisions to follow. Even when we have to do bitter things, we know that Jesus is sweeter than those bitter things. You're going to have moments in your life where you have to decide what holds greater sway over your life. Students in here, are you going to be willing to go on a mission trip? Are you going to be willing to maybe give up a couple years of financial stability to go do something for God, even when your parents say, I don't think that's a good idea, when the people around you say that's not a good idea? Parents, are you going to let your children go? Are you going to relinquish them to the control of God in their life when they come to you and they say, I believe God is leading me here? There are bitter things that we have to face, but we have to understand that if God calls us to go, we must go. We must follow him. Some of us in the business world, we're going to be faced with temptations to cut corners. Are you willing to cut corners? Or are you willing to follow him in the most absolute way possible? Are you going to obey him in your finances? Are you going to obey him in the hardest and most difficult circumstances in your life? You see, God is calling us. He's chosen us. But we have to be willing to follow. We have to be willing to go with him. I'm going to finish with this last statement here. It says, to follow Jesus means you subject everything in your life to his lordship. Forsake all that he has forbidden, and you pursue all that he has prescribed, and you follow it unconditionally. There will be tough things in your life and tough decisions that you have to make, but I will tell you this right now. If you choose to follow Jesus, he will be with you until the very end, even to the end of this age. And the promises that he has made to you, he will keep until your death, and he will keep keeping those until eternity has passed. So today, are you willing to be not a Christian, but a disciple?
So our last point is this. And when you begin to look at it, you'll begin to understand that Jesus commands us to reproduce spiritually. Okay? And what happens is, in verse number 19 there, he told his disciples, follow me, he told them, and I will make you fish for people. He commands us to spiritually reproduce. And that means that you're going to bear fruit spiritually. You see, he's telling us in Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, he gave us a command. Go into all the world and do what? Make disciples. Make disciples. And so what we need to understand is this. He says to make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And what? Teaching them to observe all the things that I have taught you. All the things that I taught you. So the whole center of this, ladies and gentlemen, is this, is everything that we do as a church, everything that we do as a Christian focuses on teaching others what God or Jesus has taught us. Do you understand where I'm coming from now? I hear people all the time say, well, I'm a Christian. There is a difference between being a Christian and being a disciple. You can be that 5-year-old little boy that is put into the school of Torah, and you can learn the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and bail out and learn a trade. And you do that trade. Or you can learn those 5 books of the Bible and understand that God is calling you to something more greater. And what do? You hook yourself up with a rabbi, someone that's learned, that's a teacher, a rabbi with smisha. Let me say this to you. I have smisha. I have authority. You want to know why? It isn't because of what I've learned, it's because of what He has given me. Jesus has told us, if you will become my disciple, if you'll reproduce spiritually, He says, here's what I will do. I will give you authority. I'll give you authority. I don't get my authority from you all. I don't get my authority by some name on a list. I get my authority from God. Where do you get your authority? You don't get it from me. You don't get it from your husband, your wife, your kids, or anybody else. You get it straight from God. He gives you the authority to be the rabbi if you choose. If you choose. And the things that He wants you to do. You see, we need to understand in Luke chapter 19, Jesus begins to tell His disciples, what did He come into the world to do? To seek and to save that which was lost. So let me say this to you. If you are a disciple of the rabbi, the greatest rabbi there ever was with the greatest authority, smisha, and want to be his disciple or talamandan, then you have to learn the principles that Jesus came to do. Seek and to save that which was lost. That's why we're saying, who's your one? I've been working on a guy for 8 years. And I'm hoping and praying that I'm still got 8 more years to work with him. He continually tells me, no, if I come to church, the place will fall in. And I'll keep telling him, no, it won't. I'll bring the church to you. There's no timbers out here. You don't have to worry about anything falling in. But here's my question. You see, Jesus told us to go out and produce fruit. Okay? My question to you is this. What fruit are you producing? Who are you discipling? Who are you teaching? Who are you bringing alongside of you? You see, don't get mad at me, but let's get real. You don't disciple anybody on Sunday morning. You don't. In order to disciple people, you have to get down to know them. You got to get into their life. And you've got to be honest with them and they with you. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, I have been trying my best since I've been here the last 12 years to teach you this isn't where we grow. If all you do is come to Sunday morning, you will be the most stagnant Christian you'll ever be. You will not grow. And when life hits you the hardest, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going to get bombarded. Because why? When Jesus had hard times, he needed his disciples to go with him and pray with him. It is easy to say, write a note to someone and say, will you pray with me? And may I say with you, by the best of intentions, most people will tell you that they'll pray with you, but they won't. As soon as they walk away, they've forgotten about it. No, will you pray with me? Yes. Let's find a place where we can meet and let's pray together. Let's get down and let's hold hands and let's just cry. And let's just share those times and share those praise. Ladies and gentlemen, that's when we get real. Jesus didn't just stay with his disciples on the Sabbath in the synagogue on Saturday. Jesus was in his disciples' lives, ladies and gentlemen, wherever he went. And that's why I say to you, we give you opportunities to get into small groups. We have a men's small group that's on Tuesday that we're going to move to Thursday. Why? So that we can get some of the wives to come to small groups on Thursday. So you don't have to split, you don't have to come two different times. You can come the same time. We offer small groups on Sunday morning at 9:30. That's where you learn. That's where you grow. That's when you ask the questions. That's when you get real. That's when you're talking to people and sharing with people your prayer request. On Sunday morning, it doesn't happen. It will never happen until we learn that this is what God has called us. Some of us are stuck in stage one. Yes, he's called us, we're willing, but that's as far as we've gone. We have never trusted. We've never said, Lord, here's where I really want to go. This world is going to hell unless we take hold of it. Because this is what Jesus told us to do. Be my disciple. A disciple says, I do what Jesus does. I care for people. We need to get out of there. And my question to you is this. Are you ready this moment to say, God, yes, I'm willing to follow you, but now I want to move to the next stage. I want to be your disciple. Michael has already alluded to it. We have already started, and we've opened it up, and we're going to open it up to more. We're opening up a pipeline where we're going to sit down with some people and walk through and teach them and take those people and say, okay, now you get your disciple, and you're one that you're bringing along. So we've taught you, now you can teach them. We'll give it to you. We'll hand it to you. We've done all the work that was given to us that is free. It doesn't cost you a dime. All it costs is a little bit of your time. Is it precious? Yes. But how much time do you have right now? Honestly, how much time do you have? Can you carve out 1 to 2 to 3 weeks? In a few weeks, last week we had people showing up to be volunteering for VBS. And I was honest. I had no clue we were going to be able to pull this off because I had no idea how many people were going to show up. Somebody says, how many volunteers do we have? And I says, I have no idea. I only know 6 people that told me they were going to help. We ended up with 20-some. It went off. It was awesome and great. But what's going to happen is, in a few weeks, we're going to start Awana again. And what's going to happen is we're going to beg and borrow and steal all the volunteers that we can get. I don't want to beg anybody. I don't want to borrow anybody. I want people to say, hey, I want to make disciples. And you know the best disciples that you can make is a little child. Ask Dave. Ask Sue. The comment from Sue was, and she posted it on Facebook, was, this is my first year that I volunteered for VBS. And I had the best time of my life making an impact on those kids. Those kids run around, they scream, they holler. They have no discipline. And sometimes you just want to grab them and corral them and chain them up somewhere. But when I sit back and I watch a little boy that comes running across the street, and the first thing he says is not, "Hey, Pastor, good to see you. Where's Mr. Dave?" Where's Mr. Dave? And you see the smile on that kid's face. Ladies and gentlemen, that makes a difference. Because there's a kid looking for somebody that's made a difference in that kid's life in the last 9 months. Sharing. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what God's called us to do. So as we get a song of an invitation, as Diana plays, I told you, and as I told you, and I had no clue when I told you this, what was going on in my life. I told you I did not know if I was going to live or die. I did not know if tomorrow was going to come. I had no clue that there was stuff going on wrong in my heart. And that, yes, I was on the verge of a heart attack, and I could have just killed over. Had no clue. But God, for some reason, spared me and allowed them to find what was wrong and now give me the strength back that I've had before. Not tired all the time, doing well, doing excited. The doctor looks at my numbers, they're great, they're wonderful. He says, okay, we can get rid of this medication. You don't need it anymore. And I say, that's cool. I'm great, wonderful, losing weight, which is good. And so it says this, I still don't know when my end is going to come. But I know one thing, I don't have as far to go as where I've been. And I have promised God one thing, and that is this. I am going to finish this good. I'm going to finish this good. There's not a lot of people ain't going to like me because I have cuddled and I really haven't been what I should have been. And that is this, honest, and told you. Your family's dying and going to hell because you won't tell them about Jesus. Your neighbor's dying and going to hell because you won't tell them about Jesus. You're waiting for somebody else to tell them about Jesus. And Jesus has been trying to tell you all along, you need to talk to them. 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 This is why I say to you, we will train you to be a disciple so you can talk to people about Jesus. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. And everybody is capable to do that because Jesus has called you to do that. And he doesn't call you to do something that he doesn't equip you to do. One way or another, you can do it. It may not be deliver a great big speech. It may just say something to them. And that's it. Here it is. Let's stand, would you?
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30 with our morning worship. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with a Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.